What is going on, everybody? How are you guys doing? Welcome to another Pixelogic stream. I have a really awesome guest here, Brian Baity. Brian, introduce yourself. How you doing, man?
How's it going, everybody? Nice to be on the show here this week, and we're going to be talking about some fun things
Yeah, it's
like
really awesome.
sports.
Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. It's really awesome to have you here. So, as you guys know, we do industry spotlights. This is our second industry spotlight right now, which is really, really cool. So, you're the second one to have on here. It's really awesome. Real quick, before we get started, I just want to let you guys know that we are also having a image breakdown coming up on May 17th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, so around the same time. So make sure that you guys go ahead and follow the calendar, like, subscribe, all that stuff here, so that you know when we go live, because we want to bring the best artists and the best content to you as much as possible, so you guys can follow along and give you guys the insight as much as we can. So without any further ado, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and add you here.
Sure thing.
How's it going? What do you do?
Good. I'm reporting here from my tiny little hole, which I call an office, down in my basement. A lot of us nowadays work remotely. And that's the great thing about this industry now. You can work pretty much anywhere, especially with ZBrush. You can work remotely with companies, and after COVID, people kind of saw how things were going, and even for my day job, I work from home right from here. So it's a great feeling. I get up and kind of shake it off and get to work every day.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Actually, the last couple of years has been super interesting because everything's kind of pivoted and changed, and so now with the internet and all the stuff that we can do and all the progression that's happened, it makes working from home a lot easier. So,
oh yeah, and I hate to say it, but I don't really miss the office setup. But I miss the camaraderie. I can't even say it, camaraderie between people. However you say that word. I miss having people around and stuff like that. But whenever I'm feeling blue, I'll just hit, "Hey, how you doing?" or whatever online, and then make sure I get a little sun and get out of the house here and there when I can. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, if for those of you who are just joining us, if you guys are not familiar with Brian Baity, does a lot of toys and collectibles, and you have a really unique style about you that I just love, because you capture likeness so well, but at the same time too, you put your own spin on it. Could you go a little bit into that?
Yeah, it's kind of been some years of back and forth of seeing what hit and miss, seeing what kind of worked for me. With that more realistic cartoony style that I came up with there, with the big heads, and like you're looking at right there.
Yeah.
If you want to click on one of those, for instance, and I actually have the model too. I'll pull up later on him, but that style was kind of developed based on old school caricature work. Where people take features and you expand upon them to bring out the likeness, so to speak. When it comes to likenesses, a lot of times people dial in way too much on what it should be, and then if you're doing ultra realism for a company or for yourself or whatever, and you put your work out there, people are going to pick it apart. They're going to find any nuance or any, his nostril is too much to the left, whatever. They're going to find something wrong with what you did. And there's nothing wrong with critiques. They're healthy and they make you better. But I tried to find something that wouldn't be so critiquey, so to speak. It is what it is. It's stylized, and who's to say that I couldn't exaggerate the nose or the mouth that much? If you can't see the likeness, then there's a problem. If you see it sort of, then people are kind of like, oh, okay. So that was kind of where I went when I was developing that stylized look and that cartoony vibe. You know, I kind of play with hard surfaces quite a bit with those styles. As you can see, that was a Marty and Doc that was
Yeah.
done for, and this is what I want to get into. When you develop your own style and you come up with something and you put it out there, a lot of times, if it's decent enough work, someone will reach out to you, and then the ball starts rolling.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
the ball starts rolling, and then they're like, "Hey, you got something here. We don't know what it is, but we might want to investigate and see what we could do." That that Back to the Future set there was done for actually for the Bradford Exchange at one
Oh,
point,
cool.
and they were trying to reach a younger market, so to speak, that because they kind of cater to older folks, kind of with some of the stuff that they do. And it was the Bradford Exchange in Hamilton, which is a subsidiary of Bradford, but they gave me the will to come up with these on that. And then unfortunately they never came to fruition, but we did a few different tests with that style.
Right.
For instance, and that style right there with the Beatles, that's what I call my criblets, my little creation crib. I call them criblets. They're more cuter, but it's messing with very basic shapes, but you can still kind of see the likeness in there, and exaggerating that. John there on the end has kind of his very tired, lazy looking, face, and you got Paul there with his eyes, and I was really trying to lean into that vibe. And the hands are dumb simple.
Oh yeah,
they're just like mittens.
No fingers.
Yeah, sometimes I'll give them a thumb, sometimes I don't. It just depends on how I feel. I was all done in grayscale.
Yeah, but like you were saying earlier, going back to like some things come together, and sometimes it just kind of falls off. That's part of the industry, so to speak, where you create something, and 1 minute you have something that you think a lot of people are going to be like, yep, let's go, send it all the way through, and then the next minute they're like, you know what, never mind, it's okay. But that's part of the industry, but it happens sometimes.
It's the creative process, 100%. You're trying to figure out something, or you have an idea in your head. Take, for example, right there, Flight of the Familiar, which was, I'm a big fan of What We Do in the Shadows. A lot of people are. And I wanted to do something different, but I didn't want to blow up the head so much like I did before. And if you scroll down, you kind of see where Guillermo's being held up by Nandor the Relentless. And that's his familiar. And he's like, fly like a bird. I had that in my head because that scene happened in the show. And I was like, how cool would that be? And, the best compliment I can get when I show something like that is, where can I buy this? Is that available? Because I see it right there.
Yeah.
But that's all digital. It was never a product. It's never been taken anywhere except rendered. It's all digital. I hate to tell people like that, I have to put disclaimers in there. This isn't real. This isn't product. It's just fan art. I did it for fun, yada, 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 on my weekend, just to have a blast and, create something out of nothing. And that's what we all do. We create something out of nothing.
Absolutely.
And then, you catch a vibe for I love fan art. I love fandom, pop culture in general. I try to jump on something every once in a while that might need to be addressed, or I think that might be topical. Will it get me hits on Instagram? Sure. Is it a little bit, I don't know, what's the word?
Like sporadic, trendy, random.
Because some people are like, this is just schlotchky work that somebody did just to get people's eyes on it. Sometimes it is that way, but sometimes it also is good enough for people to say, hey, that actually is art.
Absolutely.
A good example would be that Will Smith that I
do you want to pull that up?
Let's see, I don't have it on my end on the thing, but I might be able to, there we go.
Perfect.
Got an image of it. Good example. This is a month and a half ago. Like this. Okay, well, when this all went down, for instance, everybody was in shock and awe. in the moment, and they were like, "Oh, what a terrible situation! Don't make light of this. Don't make, we want to forget this and move on." At the same time, I was like, imagine, doing what he did, and then 20 minutes later, everybody shuts up and stands up and gives him a applause.
Mm-hmm.
And he's holding up an Oscar, and he apologized for what he did. But at the same time, I'm like, could I capture both elements of that?
Right.
Could I capture the swing and also the I won,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of striking to me, and I wanted to invest. I didn't want to put any more. I did it on a week night or something like that. I put like 4 hours into it. 4 hours tops.
Yeah.
That was it. And moved on. But I posted it, and then there was a lot of feedback as far as should you have done that or whatever. But hey, controversy creates I don't know what the word is.
Exposure.
Yeah, exposure. And
Yeah.
there it is. And and you don't want to be that person that says, I'm the first to do it, but I was pretty much out of the gate really quick, and I'm sure there's been quite a few more artwork based on that as well. But I did my spin and I was done with it. And
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing about being an artist is that we're in a pool of millions of other artists, and it's important to try to kind of, if we want to get noticed, we have to do something that's going to help us be seen. And fan art is a really great way because you can hit all those trendy pop culture things. A lot of people know that that's what I love to do. And so the next thing is like hit a trend, even if it's like just something super small, that just dropped a popular TikTok that went viral to a big Oscar event. You're going to get noticed.
Yeah, because people can relate. It's relatable to them. If you do something that's not related, to the masses, I should say, or whatever's the next big thing, you never know. But the one thing, I'd suggest that people don't do is just try to steer clear going down the same path as everybody else. I've preached about this in the past. There's so many people that loved comic books growing up and certain things that are like, I want to do my take on Iron Man, or I want to do my take on Wolverine. And that's fine. You can do that, but you're piling it on top of the other 15 or 20 Wolverines that were uploaded in the past, month or so. And it just kind of gets you lost in the mix a little bit. So when you stray from that and kind of find something that you're more catered to, or whatever's the hit thing, even if it's bandwagon, it can get you some looks and some actual exposure. That's the thing, getting exposure to what you're trying to achieve, or the road the path you're trying to take, and we could segue right into toys if you want, because that's kind of, that exposure will, if you're trying to go down that road and you want to be a toy designer, there's a lot of different things to factor in. Sure, you might be able to nail a likeness or do, outstanding work and you're up there, but is it toy design work or is it like gamer work?
Right.
There is a difference. There's a huge difference in this type of modeling that we do in the toy industry based on what we have to, how we have to process it and make it product ready, compared to what's done in the gaming industry, where everything needs to be kind of really light, and the files are, nowadays they're a little more dense, but yeah, it's just a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that being said too, while you showcase this awesome John Wick,
sure, I will pull in on this. Sorry about that. It's been lingering.
No.
And I was like, it didn't go away, so here we go.
I just want to remind the chat that please, if you guys have any questions for Baity about what the industry pertains, how any real questions pertaining to the collectibles and toy industry, please feel free to drop those questions, and I'll feed it to him so that way he can answer them as best he can. This John Wick, man, one of my favorite series movies. Like, this is one of those movies where I'm all in on.
Yeah, this was fun. I mean, the whole idea was, protecting just out of the gate. You know, he was protecting an animal or trying to, and he was exacting revenge. He's like, "You're doing all this over a dog. It's not the same dog. This is just you know, almost like a little pity kind of behind him." But you know, and I even had somebody say that dog's not accurate, but I'm like, you know, neither is the pool of blood he slipped in.
Yeah. Well, so we actually do have a first question. How do you come up with the poses? Like, do you draw them first? What's your process when you decide to come up with something like this?
You know what? Every once in a while, I will grab a notebook and kind of roughly sketch something out. But there's a lot of times where I just go in there and start sculpting, and then I'll take the shapes and move them around, and then really loose though, nothing tight, nothing, you know, loose shapes. And then I get to the point where I'm like, okay, he's sitting down. I kind of like that. I can take, you know, I have a library full of these stylized parts that I kind of built for myself over the few years, where I can quickly go in there and start moving things around. Sure, the legs are a little gnarly, and so is this. You know, this could actually be a lot cleaner. I could go in there, flat surface this, as you know, like I just did here, and really polish that and clean up those edges. Matter of fact, if it was AD'd or art directed by a client, I'm sure those comments would come flooding in. Like, okay, well, because they take a critical eye to what you're doing, because this is going to be for product. If it was going to be for product, and they would say, okay, you know, here's some red lines. This looks wobbly. This looks wonky. You know, why did you do this? And I have to either explain why, or if it's my style, or I have to match what their vision is. So just cleaning things up. But for the purpose of this, you know, I wanted to invest so many hours and then move on with my life and render it out and throw it out there in the world for people to say, hey, that's cool, you know, without having to invest too much. And my creative, I'm scatterbrained so much that I got to keep moving. And I got to move on to the next, you know, on to the next. I get something out of my system. It's almost like a game. When you start a model from scratch and you want to see how much you can crank and get done in a weekend, and not sit there and noodle on something for 3 or 4 weeks, especially if it's for yourself. That, you know, that's my advice. Everybody works differently, but the creative process, every once in a while, if you're working on something way too long, then you kind of run into those moments where you start questioning it.
Yeah, you overanalyze, and you start like really, you know, you realize that this one line is like out of whack, and you're like, never noticed that before. Yeah, it's too much for sure. I mean, I always personally have something on the side happening, but like you said, you know, it's like you don't want to spend forever on it either. You definitely want to keep projects flowing and moving, because it helps the creative process, you know.
Exactly. You know, the Kevin, same type of style. He's sitting down with a big spillage under him, and it's all flat and low relief. And I didn't invest a lot of time on the back. It could be way cleaner. I don't even want to show that for the purpose of, you know, it never went that far anywhere outside of just the render that I shown. It was from that, you know, kind of iconic moment in the episode of The Office.
Yep.
Where he was talking about Chili Day and world famous chili, had to get it made.
Yeah. What would you say is your typical workflow as a toy designer? Like, what does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis? You know? On a
day-to-day, let's hop into an actual toy design. You know, these are a lot of my original designs, but here's an example, and I got permission to show this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, this is what, you know, set came in way bigger because of it being
it's huge.
It's huge. Yes, I'd dial it back. That's a Banjo-Kazooie, you know, and I did that for Premium DNA, and it's actually up for pre-order now still. So I reached out and I said, hey, I still have this like readily open and available. Can you? I did it last year, and he's like, oh, sure, you know, go ahead and, you know, have at it and show them. You know, certain companies are way more stringent, and you kind of, you know, you sign that NDA, that's it.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little more later.
Yeah.
But you don't really showcase what you did. That's why I kind of suggest putting, once you get your foot in the door and you get some work, if they allow you to show it on your Instagram or your ZBrush Central or on your page, whatever it is, great. But if they don't, you got your paycheck from
Yep.
them, and that, you're an artist. You're an artist. You already were an artist, but now you're a paid artist. You're in the business of commercial design, and a lot of times, a lot of people get their hands on things other than you. You're not you're not going to be the last person to touch an item, whether it be overseas or whether it be in house. Somebody's going to modify or do some things, and your job is just to take it to when they are say, okay, your job is done. It's a big difference. And a lot of artists out there that do statues and stuff like that, when they're trying to do toys or something like that, they don't always get that, because it is a team effort all the way.
Absolutely.
I think I mentioned my day job. I work full time now for Super 7. And that's my 9 to 5.
Congrats.
We go over projects, but we have a whole entire team dedicated, and things will shift hands. Somebody will be working on one thing one week. Somebody might go on vacation. So we'll hand it over to someone else. I learned this early on, though, because the last 13 years of my life, when I started out digital, I worked for McDonald's Happy Meal, an agency that did Happy Meal toys. And you might think Happy Meal is the most simplistic things on the planet, but man, they are some of the most safety, driven, restrictive items that it's like sculpting in a box, because you have to get over all of these barriers that whether it be, choke hazard or pointy edges or whatever, you have to factor in them things. And it kind of takes the artist side out of it. It's still fun because you're working with all of the major licenses, which are evergreen a lot of times with Happy Meal. My Little Pony, Transformers, you have your Hasbros, and then you have your blockbuster movie events that are every summer, and you get to be privy to that a year in advance before they come out and get the information, and you're working on those as well. So, I did that for 13 years, and I learned a lot about what we can and can't do. And a lot of times it's a battle, not a battle, but it's back and forth with the original concepts, what we sell in, and what we end up with. Because a lot of times it has to be figured out while we're in the process of creating something. Like, for instance, there's a mechanism in it, and it's a pullback, and it rolls or something. And you only have the real estate of a 2 by 4 inch cube, but that mechanism takes up way so much of it. It's going to alter the shape of that, that item, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, but I put in a lot of time there and really kind of broke in that way. And then I was like, then we did do other toy designs there at that Creata. I mean, Skylanders was huge a few years ago. I did maybe, I don't know, 60 or a lot of those sculpts. A lot of those sculpts early on for Activision. We had a partnership with them, and we did the toy end. So that was always fun and creative, and we were in there doing a lot of stuff with those.
That's really cool. I mean, so would you say too that, like, especially when you're dealing with art directors and size restraints, would you say that you would start from like maybe a base mesh a lot of times, or do you actually get the chance to like start from a sphere or primitive shape?
Yeah, very much so. Depending on, say, okay, big budget films, or if it's a CG, nowadays we get assets. and or we request them because it's just easier in the production part of things to work from their assets, because they're going to be questioning the likeness or questioning this or that on it. And if we start with their model, which is typically the straight up animated T-pose, but we would chop that up and break it down, clean it up, whatever. There are cases though where we don't get them in time, so it's a race and we're starting from scratch. Primitive shapes, however, sculpting crudely from scratch, it depends on really what it is. If it's animated and stylized and has a lot of times it's primitive. But sometimes, we can start in the toy industry from a buck or a model that's already been created. Say with action figures, if they already have a certain style, the client will sometimes say, okay, I'm dropping this buck in here. Everything is already articulated. Work off of that. Work off the surface, which a lot of times is kind of hard because you're trying to keep that interior clean.
Yeah.
You got to go back in there and rework parts constantly in order to keep those clean. But it is what it is. It's part of what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, so with this Banjo-Kazooie you have here, do you mind showing some of the joints you have? Because we had a question that was,
okay.
People are curious on any good resources for, learning different types of joints. Like how did you fall into learning joints and apply those skills today?
Well, the funny thing about Banjo is I got the concept was make him look like Banjo. This was very loose, and sometimes with 3D or different companies, they will give you more information. Some will give you less. And with this one, this was more about break him up, get him to the point where we have joints, but you don't have to remove material and do all the bouillons on him. I got it to where if I did an exploded view, you would see all of these myriads of parts. You know what I mean? And I could zoom in and show you all these little.
There's tons of parts when it comes to joints.
Yeah, that is in a nutshell. You see, the arms do have the booleans in there, and so do the feet and the rods and stuff like that. But there can be so much more at detail work depending on the company. Some companies want you to take it all the way, extreme, to the point where everything is clean and flush, and you're handing it over to the factory. They send it to the factory, and the factory is like, okay, but this factory still, most of the time, will go in there and make their adjustments as needed, because they have to go in there for tooling and chop things up the right way, shell things out, and put in the screw bosses and all of that. And a lot of times we don't have to do that end of things, but every once in a while, a client will ask us to shell something out and put bosses in there and screw bosses and all that, which is just downright dirty work. But I like the middle ground. I love working in the middle ground. If that answers the question a little bit better. I mean, because some people are like, how do you do that? I opened up an action figure and I saw this craziness in there, and how do I replicate that? A lot of times we don't do that on our end. We make the solid shapes and break them up and then remove material as far as how joints are concerned. I was trying to find something here as an example.
Here, I can
action figure. But, in essence, the best way of learning about toy design and action figures is just ripping one open and breaking it apart.
Yeah.
And then you see the joints in there, and you see what we bring to the table as far as what's needed to chop things up. I do have a model that I was going to show you as far as this Superman stylized Christopher Reeves. Okay. Nice. We have two different, say they wanted to create this, and the client says to me, all right, chop them up, but we want this arm to be either a hinge type design, or we want it to be a swivel, like a classic 80s action figure with a mushroom.
Right.
there's so many different ways of doing an action figure, and this is based on my style. Here, let me turn this other one off. Let me turn that off.
And you're always trying to preserve as much of the sculpt as possible because you don't want it looking like, you know,
exactly
too animatronic either.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. It's a balancing act because you already sold in the design to the client or to the you know, to the masses or whoever needed to see it and sign off on making it. You want to stay true to that. But when you start to articulate, you do have to manipulate some things. You notice I just have this blob there, right? On this particular torso right here. You'll see I have, let me turn off a few parts here. I'm just going to show you, for example, and then I'll turn on the lights just so I can see what I'm doing here. You can see here, I have a sphere that I added in here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn it into, and you can see how it dissects into the body. Nice. But I could actually make it a little deeper, but my range of motion, when I swivel up, if you went dead center on that and turned it and angled up, it might run into that if I take it any farther out or any further in. This weird looking pointy edge here, elbow might run into there. So I kind of put it in the spot where I think was best. The next move for me would literally be, show you here. Let me turn off the torso. And feel free, if somebody is asking something, go ahead and have them speak up, and then I can answer it out loud. See,
we got a few more, but I want you to finish your thought because I think this part's the most interesting is really getting that balance, you know, because learning articulation, I feel like it's, like you said, it's a balancing act, but you as the artist are really in control of what goes where. So, you know, I find like my first time cutting an arm up, it took me like 6 hours, I swear. It was so long, but it worked. And I was like, okay. And you just get, the more you do it, you know, getting that first time out the way is the scary part. After a while, then you start realizing like, oh, okay, cool. This is how it's done. And you don't have to make your joints too complicated, right? You can keep them pretty simple.
For the sake of, you know, quick show and tell, I'm just simply dynameshing this thing into the blob there. And then I kind of soften the surface. I've already taken that sphere. And then what I did was, as you can see there, you see that that's hidden in there. I just went on my X's and made the sphere a separate sphere. I duplicated it, and then I made this piece. Now I would go in there and, you know, look at, I got to turn off the rest of the body there with booleans. You know how that works. Live boolean. And I'm going to find that arm. Sorry.
No, you're good.
But I'm going to remove, and, you know, I turn that on here with the disc, and you can see it's a little grainy there, but that's all going to be removed if I, But you get your basic disc movement there. And this stuff can, one thing I do suggest if you get into this type of work is wait to do this type of stuff towards the end.
Yeah.
You do it early, you're going to get revisions and you're going to get comments back from a client. And really it's going to affect all of those, and you're going to get warpage.
Yeah.
Like nobody's business.
So client approval is key. You know, get the sculpts, you know, locked in so that the client's happy, and then you can figure out, because I mean this in itself is a art and a process on its own. Well, leading into when you sculpt from scratch, so you got a new client and you're sculpting a new piece. Do you sculpt in scale? Or do you worry about scale more towards the Boolean final steps?
Okay, it really depends on. I worry about scale if I see something is super tiny and I already see they want to have like crazy articulation. Then I worry about bringing in a rod or bringing in something to work it in scale. Right. If it's more, if I know it's going to be huge and I can worry about that stuff later, then I don't worry so much. But at some point, you do have to dial in the scale.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
But with that, you can see how I just kind of drop that arm in there, and then I go back to the other file, and this becomes boolean. I can't even say boolean. Becomes second nature after a while. You just a lot of append, insert, delete, repeat.
Yeah. Rinse and repeat.
Actions.
Is there like any particular model or type of model that is more difficult to work with than another?
That
Hard surface versus organic. What would you
I would say yes. Yeah, organic seems to be a little easier for some. Some love working in hard surfaces, robots and stuff like that, and you're using your Z modeler and you're going in there and getting gnarly with that. But there's a lot of mechanical stuff that happens there, and you lose those edges. That kills you. You start losing those edges somewhere, or something gets muddy. You got to go back and reestablish that. So, my opinion, yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah.
On that, and then one thing I would do on here is just really dumb simple. Add my plug-in right there, and keep it to the surface and all that jazz. Where I kind of have, so then I have my mushroom made. This overlaps a little bit, but I'm not going to fine tune this right now. I mean, I could go in there and dial it in and get it perfect, but you kind of get it, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to remove. I also have another separate sphere that's a little bit offset that I would remove material from the inside of that torso.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then so we have the arm piece there. We have the neck I just turned off there or whatever, but you can kind of see how that hinge point's going to work. And then we have our clearance now where that bad boy is going to be able to turn up and turn down and all of that. If we can, I kind of have this guy here. It's the same exact model. And I actually have, printed this guy out and worked some hinges in there. You see on the arm can go up and down.
Yeah, 1 second. Let's get you full screen here.
Sorry.
No. You are good. There we go.
I didn't tell him that I was going to go.
There we go.
See how you have this stylized looking Superman. And I put a magnet in there. It just sticks on. It's prototype. It really is. In the business of what I do and what other people do for toys, this is now how prototypes are made. 3D sculpting and then 3D printing. Sometimes they will take it as far as you take the 3D print and make a mold and a cast out of it. You use your molds and you get your castings, and you might have to make multiple copies. But for presentation for one of the companies, say Mattel or somebody like that, usually at those shows like San Diego or whatever, those prototypes in the cases are done that way now, 3D printed and used by one of the services or one of the many different agencies that do them. But then that's just for the show and tell of the side of it, and then it goes into production, and then they get the actual production sample back, which is more malleable. It's actually made of plastics, whether it be in the perfect plastic color. But those prototypes, that's a acts like works like sample that goes through engineering and goes through all of those different things with that part of it. But to make like a prototype like that, anybody can do that. And if you question it, it's a one-off. It is like literally your own prototype of your design that you made. Some people are like, oh, it's a custom. No, it's not a custom. Custom something you slap paint on that was already built or something already made. You made this from scratch, just like how the pros do it. So it's a proto, even if it didn't get sold in anywhere. It's a one-off, oak, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, with this style that I developed, though, there's been a few different times where I was able to get people to sign one, and I did these with Loot Crate a few years ago, WWE. You see that same type of leg structure that I had with my Superman. They bought into it, and we made some designs, and this is fully articulated here. We got the head, and Chris Jericho here. And yeah, I was pretty jazzed about that. So I got my name on their creation crib on those.
Nice.
With an AJ Styles here, and we did maybe about 3 waves or something like that. But every once in a while, like I said, people were interested in that style. I actually had some, professional things made out of it and contracted through. Here's another. Sorry, one more time with the big screen, and I will stop. This was a concept that was done with the.
Hold on.
Okay.
Where's the other guy? We'll get you. Hold on.
You're good.
There we go.
This was a concept done for Bradford Hamilton in my style, and that's all cold cast resin. They made like 3 copies of it, and they sent me one because they were, in the attempt of selling this in with the design. And I was like, oh man, thank you. That's pretty cool. I did just a backdrop of the Falcon. It's just low relief, but it was kind of to show what was possible with that. And, obviously, I don't know if you've taken a look around, but I love Star Wars.
Yeah. It's just a bit.
Right up my alley. It never went anywhere. But the idea, that something physically was made out of this,
yeah,
I'm never selling that. That's mine. That'll be buried with me or something. I don't know.
It was cool to notice too is that you're not just doing characters, like you're doing props and environment as well. Like, is that something that's kind of big in the toy industry to be able to hit a little bit of everything so you can make a cohesive piece?
Yeah. If you, definitely. If you're trying to break in, you want to be well-rounded. You want to be able to, if somebody says, oh, can you sculpt a gun too? Or a knife or weaponry with something like that, you definitely want to say, yeah, I can do that too. The more well-rounded you are, the better off you're going to be. That's why articulation, I'm telling everybody out there, learn as much as you can about the basics of it, or try to take a model that you have and go in there and learn with the booleans and split things up, because that's what a lot of the industry, a lot of companies want to see these days. They want you to be able to do both. A lot of people can sculpt. A lot of people can knock it out of the park and hit a home run, but they don't know how to chop things up. Even as simple as a statue. You're like, oh, I don't got to do much work with the statue. Nowadays, they require you to. Sideshow, everybody else in the industry wants you to at least be able to go in there and use some booleans and break things up for their product, and they'll even go as far as giving you the keys that you can put in there, their own special keys and stuff that you insert and then remove material with. It all really depends. But don't just think, and that's another segue, don't just think that action figures is the only thing out there to do, or statues or any of that. You can get into a lot of different product design work that's out there. It's available and readily available. I mean, for a few years now, I've been doing stuff that seems like it's everywhere every season, like the candy toppers that are seasonal at a lot of stores. I've had something to do with quite a few of those that are there every year, and I still question what I got paid for, because it's just they keep using the tooling over and over and over every year, and they've made like literally millions of these things, and I'm like, wow. Wow. It's funny, but it's a paycheck, and sometimes they're really crude and simple, but it's design work nonetheless, and you did it, and if you did a good job, they will come back to you. They will come back to you and hit you up every seasonally or every once in a while. And, I just recently did one a while back, another new one where they were like, hey, we need this new topper for this, stuff like that. Another good example is these little characters here. I'm going to zoom in. You can kind of see it there.
They're adorable, man.
These were in General Mills cereal boxes. They relaunched those, and they came to me and kind of wanted a style. And I sit there and went around. I kind of drew something up, and then I kind of came up with some concepts. And this was originally supposed to be just a pitch to win to see if they could get it, but to see if they could get the rights to do something like that. And sure enough, it sold it in 100%. And it wasn't just me; it was me and the design team as well. I hit them up with some 3D stuff. I said, "Oh man, I'll just do it in 3D," and then they came back with their notes, and it was a collaboration. But at the end of the day, I didn't know that they were going to go as far as put them on the cover of the boxes. I mean, literally cover art on the back. That's unheard of for for cereal boxes.
There you go.
To seriously focus on the toy instead of the animation or whatever's on there. To actually put those on the the box and really own up to that. Lucky, Tricked Rabbit. I had to go out and buy them myself. I went and found them all. I was like, oh, those are my babies. Look at those, they're on the boxes.
So noticing that toys are painted, how much of the poly paint do the manufacturers take from your models, or do they just turn around and hand paint them themselves and then create their own color palettes?
Most of the time, within a company, someone will do the colors on a sheet, and they're called color call out sheets, where they break down what needs to be done. Sometimes the poly paint is done, and then sometimes it's actually, you'll take a gray model, you could literally take it into Photoshop or Illustrator and color over the top of it, and then color them out. But for my purposes, we will do renders. Different companies are different, but now we will paint models up, actual action figures and models up, and then they are close to that color, and then the person's color assigning will drop them on a sheet and say, hey, here's the turnaround and what's working with that.
Nice.
That's kind of loose way of describing it. Every company is so different, man. It's crazy. You learn a lot. The one thing you do learn is never come to a company and say and act like a know-it-all.
Right. You
want to be able to present yourself as a professional and do what they want you to do. Don't say, well, that's not how they did it over here. Yeah. You want to be able to weave and go with the flow. Yeah. I can't underestimate that enough. I've seen so many people that have burnt bridges because they had a vision, or they just, you got to be really humble in this business. It is an art, but at the same time, it's a collaboration with everybody you're working with. It's just so many different factors that come to the table. It's not just you. It's so many different things.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's also kind of it's kind of like a, it's not a small industry, but it's not massive either. So names get tossed around quite a bit. Like, this person's also. Oh yeah. So
we all know each other, and we all talk to each other. It's so weird. It's a small world with what we do.
When you do colors, Pantones, do you have like a Pantone cheat sheet that you go to?
Like, books, or I got one right here.
There you go.
That's the old school way of doing it. Pick a color. I usually am not in charge of this side of the fence with what I do for the most part, but every once in a while, you get a client and they're like, "What color was that you used?" And I'm like, let me look through here. That one,
Yeah.
And they'll literally use it. But that's part of the freelance game. You kind of have to go with the flow and be a jack of all trades sometimes and learn, because somebody will ask you for that, really, with colors. And you could paint the model up. I didn't mean to turn that red, but here's another example really quickly. what I did was I put this bullion here because that was to separate and split this arm out.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see this torso isn't even the right one in here. Turn that torso off.
Just cut that whole chunk off.
Yeah, it's literally nope, wrong one. Where'd that go? Torso.
Yeah.
Other torso. There we go. Okay, you can see how that's nice and clean, but
Yeah.
that's on a swivel there. And then I have this quick little 2-second, mushroom I made. I would just sit there and angle it, up to par here.
Yeah.
Down and dirty, and then move it into position with the arm here. And then, well, I don't need to show that. That neck would actually be part of the torso, but kind of get where I'm going with that. There you go. So that would be back in there, and it would be where it needs to be.
Yeah.
But
Are your joints more custom? Like you do this one by one each time, or do you have you pre-built a bunch of keys that you're like, I can cut this real fast in 5 seconds?
Yes and yes. Yes and yes. It's just, man, it's such a huge range. If you're on a series of the same type of work, then of course we're going to use the same what are they called? The same mushrooms and the same lollipop darts and stuff like that, and try to transfer them into the same model, because 9 times out of 10 a company is going to want to reuse them, and they're going to want to save on cost. Cost is everything with them.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, if you can say, hey, I did this for you and I made you these 3 models, and they didn't even think about that yet, and they're like, and I dumped these in, but you can reuse all of these internals. They're like, oh, that they just saved us some money. You know what I mean? And that's a little check mark by your name, to be honest with you, if you're thinking that much ahead as far as articulation and that kind of work is concerned, or helping them solve issues and problems. Part of our job is to be problem solvers, or the reality of truths, I like to call it. we show something, you're like, okay, that's nothing. Never sit there and tell a client no. You say, right, I can't do that. I can't. No, there's no way this is going to work. You go ahead and you just say, okay, let me investigate. I'll come back with you tomorrow and I'll show you the reality. Yeah. Whether it be good or bad, you show them, and then you put it in front of them, whether it be the art director or whoever. And then they're like, oh, wow, that's really, I see what you're saying, or whatever. But that's part of it. You don't want to ever sit there and just tell somebody flat out no. Part of working with, with people and being good to work with.
I always find that it's sometimes if you have time, you don't always have time, but sometimes if you have time, it's good to offer a couple choices too, especially for a client, because if you show them one thing, sometimes they'll really dive in on it. But if you show them 2 things, now they're comparing, and now they're looking for the better option.
They really do. They're looking for another option, but it might be a little more work. And that's the problem with freelance, is it's such a juggling act. If you're with a company and you're working the 9 to 5, it's no big deal because you're on the clock. So you can make as much changes as they need, whatever. But if you've already quoted your cost as a freelancer and you have it baked in with so many revisions, there's a time point where you have to kind of stand up for yourself as an artist and say, okay, we've reached this threshold, and I've allocated only this much time, and we've already went past that. Where do we go from here? Do you want a new invoice, or do we just stop? And then a lot of times that honesty, it works in your favor, because that honesty, you don't want to be scared of a company and say, oh, they're just complaining, because they know they're going to push. They're going to push. They're going to push and try to get as much work as they can. But sometimes they don't even think about the hours involved. I've gotten an email where 3 sentences means three hours of work.
Yeah.
And they don't, and they don't ever think, can you just quickly do this? And it might have been a comment coming out of left field from somebody else that poked their head into an office and said, hey, what do you got on that screen there? A higher up. A lot of companies, especially like the Disneys of the world, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And it, the smaller the company, it tends to be, the easier it is to satisfy. But when you have larger companies and a lot of people have their say, you just never know what you're going to get or when you're going to get it back. And that's another thing to be aware of when you're working in this industry. You might start on something and think it's only going to be a 2-week job, and it could turn into a 2-month job really quickly if you don't get the feedback you need, in a quick amount of time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, trying to find your price point, right? Because where, depending on where you are and who you're talking to, you want to make sure that you're fair to yourself, but also fair to your client.
Of
not trying
course.
to drop a $10,000 price tag unless it's warranted.
yeah, unless it warrants it, But there's certain industry standards, and there's certain, depending on the company. But I'm just being real. This day and age, a lot more companies respect what we do over here on this side of the pond, as you would say, or whatever, because we understand the pop culture and the reference that goes into it. It used to be like somebody would say, "Oh man, I ain't paying that. I can get it done for this in China or this wherever. I can get it done for this cost point. You can't match that. You can't match that." And you're like, "Go ahead." If somebody tells you that, simply just say, "Go ahead. That's fine. Go with them if they can do that." But 9 times out of 10, they're going to be working back and forth with them, because there's a lot of times there's a disconnect with a factory that's doing it instead of an artist that kind of understands or knows the thing. And I've seen so many different likenesses that didn't look like the people they were supposed to look like, and it was just like, "Sure, we can do it." They'll never say they can't do it. They will just say, "Yeah, we'll do it." Of course they can. But and that's not dogging. There are some factories out there that have killer design teams and sculpting teams in house. I'm not saying everybody's like that, but every once in a while, you get back something, you're like, wow, you get what you pay for, so to speak. So
we had a question come in for going back to articulation for a second. Circular or square key, does that make a difference? Like, how do you approach that?
Say that again.
Circular or square keys? What's what does that make a difference when you're? Okay. Yeah, so I think that's more for like collectibles, like when you're keying for a statue that's not articulated.
For instance, a good example of that would be, I would say, if it's not articulated, square, because square's going to lock it in a little bit better. I was trying to draw out a square, but I can't get the right thing here. That's a circle. That's not a square. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong screen. Sorry. I was looking at the small screen and sculpting off of it. I have 2 screens here. Okay, so we have that, but for instance, you want it to taper though, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You want it to taper out and all that. So I would go in there and change up my thing, but you get it. You get what I'm saying. I would hit my 4 corners and bring it in to almost like a pyramid, but with a flat. That would work a lot better than going in there and allowing, unless you're going for a swivel. If you're going for a swivel on something, there's nothing wrong with having a circular pyramid, because you can actually still twist and turn it. But if it's going to be stable and glued, most companies would do a square. Or a I don't know, what's a pyramid type shape.
Yeah, and the taper is going to help with the swelling, especially during the manufacturing. Whether you 3D print or whether you injection mold, well, the taper key is going to help make sure that it locks in correctly. Because if it's a sharp edge, if it's not beveled correctly, if it's too straight, it's just going to knock up against each other and won't. So taper key for sure. It's always a great way.
While we're at it, you'll notice on the end of this lollipop dart, I just kept it flat. A lot of times in the works that I do for places, I will keep it flat like that, because if I was to do an acts like works like and look at a part, and see this part that's inflated or whatever as a dart or whatever, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where it has a little more of that. I don't want to mess with that because the model shop or the factory is actually going to go in there with that tolerance, and the driver is usually going to be the amount of real estate they have internally when they're making the shell. That's going to be usually a PVC part or an ABS part. If it plug and push and plug, they got to jam that into a PVC part. So I don't know what that tolerance is going to be.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you what that tolerance,
Yeah, I don't know a lot of times, and it sometimes we'll take, and now if we get something back from them and we're working on the same toy line and they already have made the parts with the darts, then by all means I'll grab those same mushrooms out of the final piece and drop them back in there, because honestly it's going to make their life a little easier because they don't have to go back and reestablish those points.
Right.
They don't have to go back in there and take this and add I'm just hitting inflate because it's the quick and down dirty easy way to do it, but take that and add a chamfer to it. Actually, I probably, if I wanted it clean, I would have made another piece, gave it a chamfer and welded the two together. But this is, you can kind of see it's kind of dumb simple, but these are the type of parts that really for a client, even that's off a little bit. If you noticed, one of these isn't centered. You want to kind of keep things, true. And I'm just eyeballing this right now for the purpose of this, but yeah, you want it to be in the center and you want everything to be nice and things. So everything turns correctly, and then also some people would go ahead and drive the hole through here and put the pin in. If you put the pin in though, the pin does help, but you don't have to actually remove material. If you put the pin in, like right there, you can actually swivel the arm on the pin joint where it should truly be, and you'll see where your range of motion stops, limits, and goes out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Do you have a 3D printer? Do you print these yourself? Have you tried 3D printing your joints?
Yeah. Matter of fact, like I said, these guys here were all done. I'm gonna hold that up again. There's a little leg. That was all done on a Form 3. All of this was done using Form 3.
Hold on one second.
Yeah, there's like an Indiana Jones here, and that was just my own little fun design. This big head and hand and.
Is that you? No, that's me. I don't want to do that.
I keep doing that to you. Sorry.
There we go. No, that's me. I'm still learning this. No, look at that. Oh,
like, my life is hard, kid. Why would you sit there and give me a big head like that? And I even went as far as had exchangeable hands with the little,
Yeah, look at that. Look at that.
And it's in his hand. I put a magnet in there for fun.
Oh,
That's the kind of stuff you can do, on your own. On your own 3D print and then hand paint things. I got a prison mic there from another office. I dropped an arm on the other room, so you kind of get. And then he's got his head articulates, body twists and turns, which is also on a magnet that I did here.
What printer do you have?
Form 3 is what I used.
That's a good one.
It's just clean. It's just there's the SLA clean. The prints are clean. You can get cheaper, but Form 3 is just so dumb simple to use, and doesn't have as much dialing in as some of the other, lower end printers.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what makes the Formlabs printer really good. Is you can get fresh articulated parts off no problem because you're putting that money in. I've worked with affordable printers and lower price, and it definitely is a lot harder to dial that in. But technology is catching up. I mean,
it is, and they're getting more affordable, cheaper, and it's just. If you had a Form 3 and you bought like $150 worth of material, which is usually a gallon of that, I could easily crank out 6 or maybe 7 of these prototypes out of 1 gallon, easy. easy.
Then you
And
cast
that's
the
like,
mold.
yeah, and then you can cast the molds or whatever. But that's also the fine line is once you become part of the industry and you're making money and working for different toy companies, you're not the hustle becomes different. The hustle before was just to get yourself known, get yourself out there, right?
Yeah.
But the hustle becomes different because you're working for them and you're not wanting to rub anybody the wrong way by trying to make an Indiana Jones or whatever and say, okay, I made 20 of these or 25 of these or whatever, and I don't have the license, where as the client you work for has the license. They might not want to use you so much if you do that or go about that. I don't know. It's always a gray area because you just got to be leery of what you're doing. If you're trying to hustle that way, it goes back to, I started in the industry, in the garage kit industry, which was molding and casting and working in clay and wax. And everybody was putting out their wares. This is before Collectibles really, a Sideshow really took off and had their big, like I could get a fully painted thing. Garage kits is where people used to go in order to get something high end that they wanted. They looked high end anyway, painted by hand and stuff. But a lot of those guys didn't have licenses at the time. They didn't have the licenses. They were just putting out cool stuff of the movies and stuff that they liked.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens now with 3D printing communities. They're putting out stuff and they don't really have, it's a wild west out there. And, the Sideshows of the world or the Pop Culture Shocks or whoever, they not really happy with that, like other guys putting out stuff that they paid like an arm and a leg for a Lucas license or Disney license or whatever else. And then these guys are making this because they can, they can, but a lot of people don't come after people that way. I think it'll all kind of evolve, as time progresses, but still, I don't know. I didn't mean to go down that dark path.
No. I think it's important to realize because, it's absolutely right. Most of the clients I'm sure you work with have, license approval. So they can just tell you, look, we're making this thing because we have a Disney license or a Marvel license, or we happen to work with, Mattel. Yeah. But do you yourself, have you just gone out and tried to find your own license permission to kind of create your own stuff? Or do you work?
I've looked into it, but it's really about the cost. If you come up with your own original IP, intellectual property or something, and try to put it out there, I've done that with those designer babies a few years ago, Designer Con, and did them in vinyl because it was way cheaper to make your own thing. But the problem is you really got to put in the work to get them noticed and to get people to attach to that IP. If you don't have something already attached, because it's not something that people already have a direct closeness to. But when it comes to, you can sell Batman all day long based on anything. If you have a Batman license, no matter what it is, it'll sell because it's Batman. Somebody will buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing, the difference. But the difference is, 20 to 30K. Just for the license itself, and that doesn't have anything to do with the production, and it's just so costly to make to unless you have investors or whatever for an individual to go into this game. You're looking at investing at least 100K for a license plus production, and try to get the backers or people, I wish it was easier. Wish there was an easier answer because everybody would be doing it then.
No, absolutely.
You can take 10K and make spin it. But every once in a while, hey, there's somebody that will team up with you and say, I'm willing to give you these rights for a kickback, but that's all in the legal and how you get things done, and there's a lot of mom and pop companies that grew from that and were able to buy licenses after they started down that road, or the Kickstarters of the world or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely easy. I think it's definitely easier as an artist, especially when you're starting out, reach out put your portfolios and stuff out with known popular clients, get your foot in the door. They usually get you in a little easier. They probably have more room for artists, but you don't have to worry about that IP stuff,
Yeah.
unless you really want to. There are people out there who just deal with proprietary licenses and tries to fish those out to get, more people, more work. So it's up to you. But me personally, when I was freelancing, I just stuck with people who had those,
Yeah, you stick with them because they have the rights, but you just got to play by their rules because they're the ones with the licensing. But at the end of the day, it's still cool to say that you worked on said item.
Exactly.
Or, or whatever. I remember the first time I did Scooby-Doo and I was like, oh man, I actually did a Scooby-Doo. This is crazy, or whatever. Now it's like, kind of like, whatever. But just, you get that little tingle, or seeing something on the store shelves that you worked on. That never gets old the first time you see it.
No,
good or bad, production wise. Sometimes
see it in the box.
Yeah, you see it it's tangible. It's right there, and you're like, wow, yeah, I did that. Or you're like, yeah, I had something to do with that. That's another thing I want to talk about. Toy sculptors or people that work in ZBrush in general. Nowadays, you don't have to be the best sculptor in the world. You don't have to even be a sculptor if you want to, get into the business. There are people that are hiring renderers now, and people that, or even articulation work. You can do all that kind of work on somebody else's model, because honestly, most artists are like, man, pass that on to the next guy that wants to do the dirty work. If you learn articulation, or you learn how to poly paint and get it right, and then drop it into one of the other programs, such as, the industry is heavy now on Keyshot and Blender and stuff like that. And then for packaging.
Yeah.
Now, this, I showed you this. That was just a render. Those are all renders that I handed over that I did. And they used them for the packaging. And you see them on boxes all the time now, the renders. They need them a certain, based on the colors and all that kind of stuff, but they need those assets as well. You can make a living off of doing that as a colorist. And usually when you said painter or colorist in the past, it was the guy that was painting the prototypes. And that still is to a factor, that there still is a demand for that life in those type of people, because they still need to see physical copies to pass them on to the factories, or to show them for sales purposes, or to sell them in general. So that's still needed, but the renders, there's so much that can be done with those now for pre-sales, or these flashy looking posed ones where you question, how did they get that like that? And then they haven't even made the product yet, but it's right there, and it's being put on social media as far as a kickoff for a product.
Yeah.
There's jobs for people like that want to get into that world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important. That's why I always preach. And I was wondering about you too, when it comes to portfolio, like showcasing, I like to showcase the whole process. I like to showcase the sculpt, the breakdown of the 3D prints, and then of course a really awesome render, so I can tell the company, oh, I'm doing all three at once. What's your recommendations for portfolio work and showcasing?
What you just said kind of nailed it on the head. You want to show them you want to show them your triple thread, if you can. You want to show them that you're capable of doing what they need, or like, oh, I didn't know you could do that. You can do that as well. Whether it be breaking things down or color and painting, whatever. You want to show them all your strengths, even if they're not. Just breaking in is the first step. You can get better with the whole idea is fake it till you make it, right? Fake it till you make it. So you want to be able to show them all the different disciplines. A good, if you're wanting to do articulation, I would say really go in there and do the articulation, and then pull everything apart like you would see on an articulated sheet, and print that baby out. I don't mean 3D, but I meant like print out the sheet, put it in your portfolio, or show it online. Like, here's an exploded view of all the parts, because that's the big difference between doing sculpting for just sculpt sake, and you're talking 30 to 50, maybe even 100 parts in a file.
Yeah.
And they're all a little individual, and it's tedious work. It's very tedious. It's still fun somewhat, but it's not as fun as the sculpting end of things.
Right.
I'll put it that way. It's not as fun. You're not as jazzed, but you do get better at it. And then it becomes secondhand if you're using live bullying and other such things to, remove material and part things out. And you get savvy too. You start, like, oh, if I do this, I can do this, or bring this over here, and all of that.
Absolutely. What would you say is like your favorite project you've worked on, start to finish, like your favorite project to date?
Oh man, are you talking about for myself, or are you talking about for a company?
In general, just like that one project, you look back and you're like I have this project in my head that I did a little while ago. I can't even say yet, soon, hopefully, but it's like this is always going to be that project. I'm like, yes, I was on that.
Well, I mean, one of them was this. It was like an achievement in my own head, but it was a McDonald's Happy Meal toy and it was only available in like Australia or something like that. But it was a little globe, like anemone or whatever. Like it was like one of those. Anyways, it had a spinner on it, but it had a clownfish on the inside, and it was like one of my first projects that I sculpted. As it was just a real clownfish, but you spin it and open it, spinned around and kind of collapsed on itself. But when I got that in my hand, I was like, I figured that out, and I did that. I'm like, anything is possible. I can do anything. After that whole thing, I didn't even know how to sculpt a clownfish. I never did one before, but I did it. Right?
Yep. I feel like sometimes that's like, the thing you didn't ever do before, that's the thing you end up loving. You're like, yeah, okay, I've never done that before. Great.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and there's been a few where it was like my first this or that or certain characters. I think there was a picture that was floating on there. I'm going to ask if you can pull that up real quick, because that'll go back into toy design. I showed it because it's been out, and is the Wonder Woman. Is that still available there, Kyle?
Well, yeah, we'll see if we can pull that up real quick. That's good, because actually that'll be leading into another question we got, which is like, advice on starting to learn fundamentals. So we can kind of wiggle into that question.
We can go into that. For a few years there, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years. One of the ways is getting into a place a lot of times isn't actually going out on your own, but you reach out to other people that are already in the business doing it. And sometimes they'll throw you a bone and say, okay, I don't know if you're familiar with Four Horsemen Studios.
Yes, I am.
Four Horsemen, like, they really changed the game as far as DC Direct was concerned, and their stylized bodies that they were doing for Mattel. Their Mattel work was just off the charts. And then He-Man, Masters of the Universe, all that stuff, they came in with a brand new style and really changed the game there. Well, even to this day, they are still, running and gunning and doing stuff for the industry. That Wonder Woman that was up there was the Wonder Woman that I did for them. They sent me, they said, hey, you want to do Wonder Woman? I was like, of course I do. Of course I do. Right? That was my first Wonder Woman. And, they gave me the designs. And literally, this was one of those ones where they were like, okay, we have a generic female, a couple of parts we want to reuse here. So they sent me a couple of reused parts from the archetype. And then I reworked it from there, and I added, original head, added all the gauntlets and the outfits and all of that, shield and everything else. But, for that to come out by Mattel and be produced and me to be able to pick it up off the shelves was just kind of like, wow, jaw dropping. And,
right.
Since then there were other ones too, but, it wasn't like one of the cornerstones of one, there were other side characters that I've done for them as well, and stuff. Or even so, they would sometimes just send me a few parts. Companies will do that too, where they piecemeal you something like, oh, we need a weapon done, or we need this done, or can you do this head?
Right.
Or we already have the body being done, or somebody, a little slow right now, or they're backed up. Can you help us out? And you pitch in and do that kind of work. And then you just become, I can honestly say I became part of their stable for a good while before I started at my job with Super 7. I was with them and I still do have a really good relationship with them.
Nice.
They were able to hand me stuff that was fulfilling outside of, Happy Meal world.
Yeah.
Like articulated parties, it's stuff I could walk into a Target and pick up and say, hey, this is, there's no, writing on the box that says that you did that, but
Right.
with that kind of work, how that goes.
Yeah. But that circles back to, just trying to showcase that you could do a little bit of everything. Don't be afraid to showcase that work, because like you said, you might be able to pick up some side work that's like, oh, hey, I just need this axe or this helmet built, and then before you know it, you make a name for yourself helping out, and then they're like, hey, start putting you on bigger jobs. Sometimes it takes that step in the door, just put a foot in there and see what happens. And
yeah definitely. It's just that's another thing in the industry is like, well, if anyone goes to my Instagram, 9 times out of 10 I'm typecast, because that's a lot of my original work. And it's funny is a lot of people don't realize what I'm doing for companies or what I've done in the past for companies, because a lot of times I haven't put it on the air or put it out there. One of the best things when you finally have a snowball or a revolving door of clients is just to kind of shut up and do the work. They respect that. They respect that because you're showing you're a part of the team. It's not so much of a hustle anymore. When I want to hustle, I'll put up my original designs like you see there on Instagram.
Yeah.
That's my hustle because I find joy in doing that. Or Bob's Burger character or whatever every once in a while, or something. That's my hustle. But when it comes to having to what's the word? When it comes to having to constantly show off your latest and greatest from a company, sometimes a lot of companies want to show you. It's okay to show the final product, but they don't want to show you the work in progress.
Right.
You can get into a lot of trouble that way because some things aren't signed off or whatever, and you signed an NDA on that, and it's clearly got to be a substantial amount of time, or you don't want to show, get involved, because the fan base, they'll go back and hit up the company, and I say, hey, I saw this, but it didn't come with that. And you're like, oops, slipped through the crack. I just showed a weapon or something that didn't come because it was cut at the end, and then that comes back and blows back on me. Right. I was like, I don't want that. No one wants that. The blowback.
Companies too, they don't want the possibility of being poached. You showcase something and then they hire somebody like, here, work 24 hours straight, get this done before them. You want to be very careful of that.
It's world. Even though you want to get your name out there and be known, like if you have multiple eggs in a basket and you're getting in the work, just it's kind of good to just sit back and do the work. And every once in a while, if something comes out, I kind of find it refreshing to not say something now. If something I did and I'm like, I gotta say I did that, it's okay. I got paid. That's where it's at. I kept the lights on.
Exactly.
Right? He kept the lights on for the most part. And
How long would you say in a given project they'll give you? Like, how much time do you think they'll give you for making a character from start to finish?
A window from a character for start to finish is usually around, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about adding in articulation, then kick that out the door. But to get first show or first round, so to speak, where they want to kind of give it a look. 2 weeks is a minimum. 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. It depends on, and if it's really a cutesy style or something, then it might just be a week. I don't really know. But if you're doing something gnarly with a lot of attention to details, then you're going to go in there and spend a little bit more time finessing things and getting them where, everybody's speed is different depending on what they're doing, but you can rough a buck in 2 weeks easy. Most people can, depending on
it helps to be honest with yourself too. If you're especially when you're freelancing, you're gonna. I have experience where clients have asked me, how long do you think this is going to take you, and you got to be honest with yourself and with them. So if you quote around that time, you're going to be right within that ballpark usually.
Yep. Yeah. You don't ever say 2 to 8 weeks. Give them a big window, big giant broad window, and I don't know. But if you tell them, see, you got to be honest with yourself too. I tend to, in the past, I've given myself allocated a few more days than even if I know I can knock something out in 2 days, I'm going to say 4 days, because you don't know what's going to happen between now and then, or if they're going to come back with more information or, whatever. You just want to give yourself a little more, especially if it's something that you can do under a week.
Absolutely.
For the most part, most projects, give yourself a good week or so. Don't sit there and say, because you're not honestly, you're not impressing anyone if you turn it over the next day. You think you are. Wow, they were quick. Unless the only way, okay, there's an exception to that. If it's one of those, we need this ASAP, and they've already came to you and they know what you can do, and that's why they came, because it's hot and it needs to be moved on, and that's why they are hiring you. But if you're fresh and new, don't sit there and try to crank something out one day and they're like, wow, they didn't really put, especially if it ends up being bad and then they question that you didn't put much time into it. It'd be a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you always put your best foot forward, but unless you're bailing somebody out,
Here's an example of a backdrop. Like I quickly made that ring for the whole purpose of the render. It's cut off.
Yeah.
Goes in there, and then and I was able to get my angles and go in there. But I low key, I'm a big wrestling fan. I always have been all my life, so I kind of gravitate to some of that kind of stuff. Here's another one I don't think I pulled up earlier. There's a Ron Swanson.
Oh, nice. So you would say too, like, is your process when you're ready to finalize, like you have it all done, you Dynamesh to watertight it and then decimate it, or do you have any other like trade secrets?
No, you decimate. The very last thing I do is decimate a model.
Yeah,
you decimate the model at the end when everything is approved. I don't, and then even so, I will save out a model called decimated, because I might have to go back to the previous version later on, because nothing's ever done. And then even if you think it's getting ready to hit the shelves, they could come back a year later and be like, "Hey, remember that project that?" And you're like, "Yeah, what about it?"
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty funny that way too. You never know. Save iterations.
Running changes, they call them. Anything can happen. So, and you might need it later too. You might need it for parts later, or you had like a really good, obviously these hands are gnarly and stylized, but you had some good hands you used. You might want to save those out and reuse them if they're original and they're generic. There's nothing wrong with that in this business we're working in, to repurpose a part, or whatever speeds up the work.
Yeah, if you sculpted it and you have it, hold it, because you never know.
Parts library is what I call it.
Kit bashing was original toy making, trying to get stuff done quickly. You look at those old Star Wars toys of like 1970s and you're just like, man, they just slapped them together as quickly as possible. So you can do the same thing in ZBrush, save out those assets. You have a hand that you've sculpted, a base mesh, just reuse that, if it fits. It absolutely just makes
in our initial call up a few days ago, when Paul held up that book, and it was called Tim Bruckner's book for toy design, right? Yeah. There's that toy design book. And here's the thing about that. There's a whole article, a whole part in there where he's literally, he constructed a lot of stuff for DC Direct and their action figures articulation. and early on, and he was showing how he would cast out an arm, make the mold, and then reuse the arms later for other characters.
Yeah.
So it's no different traditionally than what we're doing digitally now. You know, if you can reuse some parts and speed up your job, then by all means do so.
Yeah.
It's a professional world we live in, and it's only going to help speed up the process.
Yep. And that book, that book's going to teach you everything. So yeah, get that book for sure. It's awesome. I have it. It's awesome. No. Well, it's definitely amazing to have you on here. It's 2:30 right now, our Los Angeles time. I'm sure there are a few more questions that might come in, but in the meantime, you know, I just want to say thank you for being on here. Is there anything else you wanted to showcase or kind of?
Not a problem at all. I apologize about like I said, I wanted to get more into the articulation, and I had some exploded views of some certain characters that I wasn't able to track them, you know, down, so to speak. But that's mainly more stylized based on that. And then it's also kind of, I don't want to show some stuff that other clients had, you know, that have come through.
No worries. Yeah. Again, it just having you here and having people be able to pick your brain and just have this conversation is super awesome. So if anybody has any more questions, please drop them in, you know, and we'll get them answered. But probably go for a couple more minutes. But dude, your work is, I just love looking at your work. It's so much fun. It's super, you know, stylized and recognizable, and just like we were talking about earlier at the beginning of the stream, you know, being able to just sculpt fan art and trends and kind of, you know, just enjoy what you do helps get your name out a little bit more. And it seems like you just love what you do.
Some advice for those they're trying to break in and do, and you know, like you said, it's a small world in the toy industry, collectibles industry, people we know, and we all talk, and we know a lot of us know each other and know each other's work. My advice is networking. Get involved, talk with some of these guys that like myself or whatever that are doing what we do, and kind of get into some of those group chats on Facebook or on Instagram or wherever where people are congregating and talking about toy design, and then get yourself known and throw something out there. You know, the Shiflets brothers board on Facebook is a great one for sculpting. But get yourself out there and network and talk with people. And then here's a big don't for a lot of us in the industry. One of the big don'ts is if I don't know you, don't just show up in my DMs and say, hey, I see you're not working with this place anymore. Can I have that client? Or can you give me the contacts? You know, that's one of the big, I want to say no's, but pet peeves within us. You know, we worked a long time to have that connection with certain people, and for somebody to just drop in out of nowhere. If I know you and I respect your work, I would gladly hand over something like that. You know, I'm like, sure, buddy, I'll help you out. Yeah. You know, but if I don't know the person, it's kind of just, it's a little rude. It's a little rude, but at the same time, I get where they're coming from, but there are better ways of going about it. Yeah. And a lot of guys have pet peeves about that. And it's like, some people are like, I'll straight up block a guy if he says that. And I'm like, nah, don't go that far. You just want to, because they're just trying to break in too. But yeah, it just kind of go out about it. There's other ways of getting that first gig. And if somebody sees that you're talented, it's only a matter of time anyway. Yeah. Only a matter of time you're going to get noticed, and somebody's going to offer you a job and offer you some work. Yeah.
I mean, just introducing yourself, you know, just, you know, if you do drop a DM and you know, just as little as, you know, hey, you know, my name is so-and-so. Yeah. I love your work, or I would love to work with you sometime. Here's my work, you know, feel free to reach out to me. Just something along those lines goes a very long way. So yeah, like you said, you know,
Totally.
courteous
Totally.
is is the way to go. We had a scale question, and I thought this was kind of interesting. So,
Okay.
how do you know when the model's the right size? So, it's like, hey, I need this to be 1/8 scale. How do you ensure that happens so that the
How do
client?
I ensure? I go into the fancy dancy little thing, 3D print Scale Master. Well, I can use Scale Master too, which is down at the bottom. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to take this arm. Actually, man, if I had solid, it would be better, a solid body. But I'm going to just take this arm, so to speak, and then I'll go here under update size ratios.
Mhm.
And already this model was, I have not resized this thing, but you can see on this side, which I'm kind of circling around,
Yeah.
the two center ones, 162 millimeters, or the overall height of this right now is 6.4, which means it's massive. I don't need it to be that big. I only need this arm to be about maybe 3 inches, so half of this, honestly. So I would go down and shrink it down, and overall with the body, or I would put a stick. I like to stick like a stick in there or a block with a cube, and then give my orientation. Like if I know my overall size is going to be 6 inches, I drop that in, and then I resize everything to that accordingly.
Yeah.
And that's the quick cheat and the quick go-to as far as getting things into real scale. And then if something's all wonky, you can always go down here to what is it? Transpose master, not transpose master, Scale Master.
Yeah.
And reset your scene scale, and then go on there and then unify that. I just hit it, but whatever. I mean, now you see how I'm shrinking everything down. Rapid fire.
There it goes.
There it goes. It is literally doing it in real time right now. All the parts. Now, what it redid it as, I don't know. It might have,
now you get to click it again, and it'll tell you.
Yeah, click it again. Set scale.
That's what that's something I like to do. Just grab a cube or something, scale it to that size, set that scene, and boom, you're done.
You scale the cube to 1 inch or something, and then you have it, and then you start that inch out, and you can actually. I've done that too, where I've taken cubes and stacked them on top of each other until 6 inches or
I do it all the time.
It's down and dirty, and it's right and accurate.
It works. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Exactly. There's always somebody that comes up with a newer version or whatever, but hey.
Yeah, I'm a simple guy. Let's just find the easiest way. If it looks complicated, that's just the bonus.
So I hope that answers that a little bit, but there's multiple ways of doing it, but that's one of the straightforward ways.
Do you have any like secret brushes or hidden features in ZBrush that you tend to use that you don't see a lot of people using, or maybe just like what's your like top 5 go-to features that you're always?
Oh man, they're right down here. This H polish, I love it. Love H polish. I got a couple of other tools from other people, scribing tools and stuff. Let's see. Who'd I get that from? It's a mixed bag, but everything you see on my screen are basically the my tools of the trade that I use all the time.
Yeah. It's that whole 80-20, 80% of that work is done with 20% of whatever tool you're using.
Yeah.
Not too complicated.
Yeah, it's just like, and you set, I can't underestimate the value of setting up. If you're new in ZBrush and you want to get used to it, and you start to set up your configuration your way, you move things around, those buttons. That way you're not going down drag list, pulling them out all the time, and having to, it's good to know where everything is. But once you know, and you navigate this, I know for newbies, sometimes this is very daunting. They look at that and they're like, I don't want to touch this thing, man. It looks like flying a plane.
Right.
But once you get in there and you kind of know where your back face mask is, or your double is, back face mask is one of my favorite tools, the old school tools to use. Why?
I love that tool.
because it's just as simple as turning my, turning off and turning on my transpose, turn that on. And then, if I needed to make something moldable, I just tug it straight back into the chest or whatever with Backbait's masking.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's got a draft. When somebody says that doesn't draft, you got to make things draftable. You got to look at all your areas on a model, make sure that, the Superman S doesn't have some undercut or weirdness about it. That's welded into the chest, obviously. But I'm just saying that's moldability is something you also have to look at on figures that people will want to know that you can kind of eyeball and see and understand. This is pulled in a tooling front to back. You want to make sure you do not have any undercuts on that surface front to back or from the backside, and sometimes there's some really gnarly details and you have to finesse those things to make them read decently without, destroying the art itself, because it's got to be pulled, especially if it's an ABS part, there's no give.
Oh yeah.
Pulled out of the part, so.
Yeah. Do you have, we talked a little bit about that book, Pop Culture, but do you have any schools or courses that maybe you could point people to that would be helpful for new artists to get started in toys?
In toys in general, I would say, honestly, in ZBrush, Bullion, and stuff like that it's a click away in YouTube, and on ZBrush, on the ZBrush website. Some of the basics in there. I still, if I don't use a tool all the time, or if I don't use something all the time, I'm always having to go back and rewatch something. I don't know how many times I've had to rewatch UV videos over and over and over, and it's still not totally in my head, or somebody does it better, or some other version of it. Nano mesh, or trying to. Every project presents a different, a different problem, and you have to figure it out as you go. That's the cool part of it. But I wish there was some big learning base as far as this is concerned, but toy design, there's schools out there that now teach it. You got Noman, and you got what's in Florida, Ringley, and all those, but I'm homegrown, man. I learned this on my own through trial and error, through old school books and theory on toy design, sculpting from wax and clay, and then just saying, hey, I could do that in 3D, and it could be even easier because I don't have to have a big armature or structure holding something up in 3D, and just kind of learned it from there. There are other programs you can sculpt in as well, but if you're trying to just rely on ZBrush, then hey, it's a way you can do everything in ZBrush and make a toy.
Absolutely. Have you ever thought about maybe putting together your own teaching videos and packaging that?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and I've been approached and stuff, but I feel like I fumble. I'm more of a doer than a shower. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I did it like this, and they're like, you skipped over all the steps. There's subtleties in there. There's some great teachers out there. Ryan Kingsland, for years has been like, you do this in the subtleties, and you go in here, and I love watching videos like that. I took his course some years ago, and I learned so much about ZBrush, just straightforward. And then there's other people that I've followed and watched, but in this game with it, when it comes to product design, you just you get better. The more you do it, the better you're gonna get. That's all I got to say. And if you love sculpting, man, just keep going at it. Keep doing what you do every day, whether it be a hobby or you want to break in and create something and do this full time.
Exactly. Shane Olson is also another really great teacher. If anybody wants to, he's also a Pixel streamer here. So, Shane
is the best. He really is. And man, and I still I love the style of Xfinity designs.
Oh, the Disney Infinities.
Yeah,
Oh,
Disney.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
hard surface and everything. That's right up my alley. I've talked with Shane plenty of times, and he does such a great job. And he's such a great teacher. Now,
He's
matter of fact,
amazing.
I think that the S cloth, I got that from him.
Is that
It's on
his?
there. I use it. Or
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of his free brushes. You can
one of
get
it.
that.
Yep.
Yep.
One of the freebies there. So yeah, I highly suggest listening to him every Monday or going back in the archive or taking his courses, man. He's a great teacher.
Yeah, I'll drop a link so people can check out those brushes.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, download those for real.
Yeah.
So got them
No,
in my...
Shane's the best. Shane taught me. Really, it's a little tidbit.
Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, no, Shane's
yeah. No, Shane's the best. Well, we only have a few more minutes. So real quick, I got like one or two more questions we can get through, but then we're gonna have to get going.
Mm-hmm.
Is there like a dream project you want to work on? Is there a client out there, Baity, that's like you're hunting?
Oh man, some of them have come and gone. To be honest with you, like early on, I dreamed of being able to. There was a lot of buddies of mine that were in that world of statue collecting, and Randy Bowen, doing Randy Bowen work, and I tried to get through that door, but at the time, honestly, looking back in retrospect, 10, 15 years ago, I wasn't good enough. And it took digital sculpting to get me there because I just wasn't that great in wax and clay to get clean. And then once you start, in digital, I was able to get there and get clean. But yeah, that was one of my missed companies. But since then, I've done work for Sideshow and I've done work for some others. So it's kind of like, okay, I can put that to bed and be at peace. I've done some statue work now, and I've done some stuff for clients like that. So, and it's hard to say who, because there's just so many out there. And man, I'm living the dream, man. I'm living the dream right now. I'm working for Super 7, and we're doing stuff that's just bananas right now, and it's cool every day. Working on that kind of stuff can be tedious work, but it's good work, and I'm really excited as to see what next year brings with us and how we go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll take one more question real quick. Minimum PC config. When you started building your system, did you build your system or did you just buy like a decent computer?
I did at one point build a system. Yeah. But it was before. I've always used decent computers. Now I'm on one that's just a hyped up. I have two different computers. Well, one is Work's computer, so Work actually invested in me. But I have an old box that's souped up a little bit, and I've also ran off of a Dell for a good while.
Nice.
And that's the thing with ZBrush. You can run it on a laptop. You can run it on pretty much anything.
Yeah, that's
standard.
That's a good thing. Yeah, ZBrush isn't, it is CPU heavy, but you don't need a super computer to do it. It's simple enough. Just don't hit Control D a bunch of times.
Yeah, you don't need a big gamer computer or something like that. You just want to be able to get in there and get the work done. But laptops, anything, I will, I when it becomes stable enough one day, I just want it to be mobile, and I want to be able to walk around on an iPad Pro and be able to ZBrush. But when we get there, we get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping it up. So thank you, everybody, for showing up and hanging out with us today. It's been truly amazing. Baity, it's been a pleasure to sit here and just be able to talk to you and, just chit chat about all the fun stuff, because I love toys. A lot of people, I came from toys. So it's awesome to be able to connect with you and just kind of help other people who are starting out or looking for resources on what they can do to get to that next step. So
I really dig being the second guest here. This has been fun. So I didn't feel like I had any kind of structure to go off of. So we were able to vibe and just go off the fly here. So that's great.
Yeah. It's been amazing. And for everybody who's still here, do not forget that on May 17th, we have a ZBrush Central image breakdown. So you want to tune into that. It's May 17th at 1 p.m. So be sure to to pop on over to ZBrush or pixelogic.com and check out the calendar so you know all the events that are coming up. But with that being said, again, pleasure to have you on here. And
thank you so much, Ian. This has been great.
Awesome. Likewise. All right. I will contact you guys later. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.